I've played flute for a long time and I like the sound of flutes very much, but what was even more important for me was to find out things about early instruments. Once I talked with a friend of mine, she's an archaeologist, and she makes copies of paintings from Egypt or from the Roman time, on the medieval time, and she said, well, what we are doing is just we're faking artworks. And she's completely right. My interest is to find out what was the idea of the old instrument makers. Why did they make their decisions in this way? Why did they make the flute in the way they did? Unfortunately, we can't ask them, so we have to find out it from the instruments. I simply start with this piece of wood, which I have already sawed into two pieces. So the next thing is I have to saw it into a square piece of wood. I mostly use boxwood for my flutes. Boxwood comes from France, from Italy, from Turkey, sometimes from further away. It's always good if you get very old boxwood. The most interesting story which happened to me concerning this is that some years ago I had been offered wood from a customer. He wanted to buy a flute and said, well, I pay you with a log of boxwood. I said, what? A log of boxwood for a flute? Are you sure this is good? And he said, yes, it's very old boxwood. It comes from an old factory in Dresden. It was made for weaving, for the, I don't know what's the word, the ships, for weaving cloth. And in former times this has been made of boxwood, and I got several logs of boxwood which are more than 100 years old, and they were so thick. And in the end I really sold my flute for a log of boxwood, and it was beautiful wood. It was Persian boxwood, which was in a diameter of more than 30 centimeters, which is very large, and it was amazing wood, but unfortunately now it's gone. The next step would be to add the ivory or artificial ivory rings. This part, I've already glued the ring on the piece of wood, and I've drilled it in a way to make it possible to put the flutes, the joints of the flutes together. In general, when you make an instrument, you learn it from another instrument maker, and he learned it from another instrument maker. But concerning wooden flutes and wooden traversos, this tradition had been interrupted in the 19th century when the modern silver flute became more and more popular. So nobody wanted to know anything about this old stuff, this old wooden flutes. We now have much better flutes. But then in the 20th century, when people became interested again in the wooden flutes, they had to find out that all information is lost. No information, no tools, nothing besides the original instruments. So what I have to do at first is to play an original instrument, take measurements from the inside, from the outside, take photographs, make moldings of the embouchure hole and the finger holes, just to get as much information of the instrument as possible. And then I make a prototype to find out if I could get as much of the qualities of the original as possible. Now here I have my drawing. This is my plan, how the piece should be, the diameters and all different positions. Well, I have my workshop in our house, which makes a working day rather uncommon. I have not go to work in the morning. I just go downstairs to my workshop. So in general I start in the morning, and it might happen that I work until the afternoon, but sometimes, especially when I have to finish orders or before exhibitions, I sometimes sit in my workshop at 11 or later at night. So this is the advantage or disadvantage of having the workshop in your own house. So. And when I make a new embouchure hole, I make it at first with a phrase in this way. And then to control if everything was okay, I make a molding. This is just stuff for a dentist, where he makes moldings from teeth, but it works perfectly for flutes as well. This is a hardener to make a So I could see the shape of the embouchure exactly how it is, and then I see there it's too narrow, so I have to work again. I always played the flute. I learned the flute when I was a child, and I always made different kinds of music. But when I was, I think, about 30, I decided to take flute lessons again. I was a social worker in this time, which was my original profession. I worked with children on an adventure playground, but then I said I have to take lessons again. And in this time I had listened to some CDs with Baroque music played on wooden flutes, which I didn't know before. So I lived in Berlin at this time, and then I simply found a flute teacher for recorder and flute. And I asked her, well, is it possible to learn this old wooden flutes? And she said, well, it's not a problem, because she had studied with a Dutch flute player, Maarten Rood. And so she said, of course you can learn traverso, and she gave me an instrument, and it was amazing to play on this instrument. So I started to get information about the making of flutes. I talked to several flute makers and tried to learn how to make this flute, but the problem was that most of the flute makers had learned it by themselves and said, well, buy a machine, make your tool, just try to play as much originals as possible and learn it by yourself. So this is what I did. I think it's now 15 years ago that I made my first flute. So this flute is nearly finished. The wood is stained with nitric acid to a dark brown color. The holes are finished, the undercut is okay. Now here you can see how the key is fixed to the flute. Now the most important thing is it tight? It is. And the last but very important step is to put the cork into the flute. All flutes have a cork in the head joint to close the bore, and the position of the cork is very important for the intonation of the flute. Now the cap is finished. And now comes the most important point, the first notes on a flute.